Welcome to Bedtime Stories. Lazy Gray. All the other squirrels called him Lazy Gray, which was really not a very nice name for a squirrel to have, but it fitted this squirrel, and I am going to tell you how he came to be called by such an unpleasant name. When Lazy Gray was born, there were 3 little squirrels in his family, but he was the youngest, and his mother thought he was the prettiest, and all the rest of the family used to wait on him a great deal, and his mother did not ask him to do errands, or to climb trees, or any other of the hard tasks that most squirrels have to do. And Lazy Gray took advantage of the kindness of his mother and his brothers and sister, and used to ask them to wait on him. When he was thirsty and wanted a drink of water, he would call to his mother and say, "I am thirsty." And she would take a nutshell and go down to the brook and fill it with nice cool water and bring it to him for him to drink. And sometimes he wouldn't even say thank you when he had finished. And he used to make his brothers go on long journeys through the woods to get a particular kind of nut of which he was very fond. And if they happened to bring him one that was not good, he would find fault with them and tell them that they did not know good nuts from bad ones. All through the summer, he fooled away his time sleeping and lying in the sun, and never a single nut did he gather for himself. But when fall came and his 2 brothers were taken ill, his mother said that he would have to help her gather nuts, because she could not gather enough to last the whole family through all the long winter. Lazy thought it was very hard that he should be called upon to work for his brothers, even if they were sick. And he complained very bitterly about how hard it was for him to climb trees all day and store nuts. Whenever he could, he stole away and lay down behind a rock and kept hidden until his mother came and found him. And then she would tell how, when it got cold and there was snow all over the ground and he was hungry, he would wish that he had been a good squirrel and had gathered the nuts while he could. But he did not believe her and said, "Oh, I have gathered all the nuts I shall want, and am not going to work any more." And then he would go to sleep again. Weeks passed by, and it grew colder and colder, and the snow came, and all the squirrels began to draw on their stores of nuts. Lazy found that he got pretty hungry sometimes, and that the habit of eating and drinking all he wanted in the summer made him want to eat and drink all he wanted in the winter. And as he had never taught himself self-denial, he ate all he wanted. And very early in the winter, he began to see that the nuts he had gathered would not last him halfway through the winter. And almost before he knew it, his whole store was exhausted, and he had nothing to eat. Then he asked his mother to let him have some of the nuts that she had gathered, and being a kind mother, she let him have just as many as she could, but she still had to keep some for his sick brothers. When she would not give him all he thought he ought to have, he decided that he would go over to a neighboring tree and ask a squirrel over there for some of his nuts. And for weeks, he went from one tree to another, begging nuts, until every squirrel in the woods hated to see him coming, for they knew he was going to beg food that he should have gathered for himself. At last he became so much of a nuisance that all the squirrels in the wood held a meeting and decided that each one of them would give 2 nuts to Lazy, as they now all called him, and that he would have to live for the rest of the winter on the store they contributed, or else starve. When Lazy saw what a small store of nuts he would have to live upon until spring, he was frightened, for he had eaten almost as many nuts as there were there in a week. But he knew he had to make them last. So he ate very sparingly, and his sides began to be less plump, and his cheeks less full. And by springtime, he was a pretty sorry-looking squirrel, with his ribs showing plainly through his sides, and his bushy tail looking bigger than the whole of the rest of him. But it taught him a good lesson, and early in the next summer, just as soon as there were any nuts to be had, he began to store them away, and when winter came again, he had a big hole in the tree filled full, and his mother was much pleased. "You see," she told him, "how wicked it is not to provide for the future and store up things that are necessary against the time when you will need them." And Lazy agreed with her and told her that never again, so long as he lived, would he merit the name of Lazy. The contest. The old white rooster was dead. The hens stood in groups of 3s and 4s all around the yard. The turkeys were gathered around the big gobbler and seemed to be talking very earnestly. The ducks stood around the old drake, who was shaking his head emphatically as he talked. The geese were listening very attentively to the gander, and he was stretching his neck and seemed to be trying to impress them with its length. "I see no reason now why I should not be king of the yard," he was saying. "White Rooster is dead, and there is no other rooster to take his place. I am going to see the hens and ask them what they think." "White Rooster is dead," he said to them, "and I think I should be king of the yard. My neck is very long, and I can see over the heads of all the fowls. I see no reason why I should not take the place of White Rooster." The turkeys and the geese, seeing the gander approach the hens, ran as fast as they could to hear what he was saying. The turkey gobbler, hearing the last part of the gander's remark, said, "How can you say that you can see over all heads? Have you forgotten me and my height? And as for being king," he said, "the rooster never should have been cock of the walk. I am a much more majestic-looking bird than any rooster. No, indeed, you should never think of ruling, Sir Gander. I should be king of the yard." The gobbler walked away, spreading out his wings and letting them drag on the ground, and gobbling very loudly. The ducks and the drake stood listening to all this talk, and as the gobbler walked away, the drake said, "I cannot understand why anyone should think of being king when I know so much of the world. I am the one to rule, for I have been all around the pond, and it is very large. Because of my knowledge, I think I should be king." "He must not be king," whispered one old hen to another. "He would make us go in the water, and we will all be drowned." They had talked a long time without reaching any decision, when the dog happened along. "What is the matter?" he asked. "The old white rooster is dead," said the gobbler, who had returned with his family to hear the discussion. "And I think I should be king, and the drake and the gander think they should. But of course, you can see that I am best suited to rule the yard. You can settle that very easily, said the dog. "You can all take a turn at being king, and in that way you will know who is best suited to rule." And so it was decided, and the gobbler was the first one to go on trial. The poor hens tagged along after the turkeys, for the gobbler insisted upon parading all around the yard. The gander and the drake would not follow behind, so the gander and his family walked on one side of the gobbler, and the drake and his family on the other. The poor hens wept as they followed behind. "I never was so humiliated in my life," said one old hen, "and it is not right." The next day, there was so much dissatisfaction because of the gobbler's overbearing way that the dog decided that the drake must take his turn. "Everybody must learn to swim," said the drake as soon as he was appointed ruler. "Come down to the pond." And off he started, his family waddling after him. "What did I tell you?" said the old hen. "This will be the end of us." The geese did not mind being in the water part of the time, but the turkeys set up such a gobble, and the hens cackled so loudly, that the dog had to decide right there that the drake was not a suitable king. The gander, knowing that his time had come, stretched his neck and looked very important. "You need not go near the pond," he said to the hens, "but you must learn to fly." And he spread out his wings as he spoke and flew over the fence, the geese following him. The turkeys flew to the top of the fence and roosted there, but the hens and ducks stood on the ground, looking up at them in the most discouraged way, and at the gobbler who gobbled at them, saying, "You are to be pitied, for you do not see all the sights we do, and you never can fly to the top of this fence." "There is the master," he said. "He is coming down the road, and he has something under his arm. I'll tell you what it is when he gets nearer." The hens were trying to look under the fence and through the holes. The gobbler looked for a minute, and then he said, "I do believe." Then he stopped. "Yes, it is," he continued, looking again. "It's a rooster." The gobbler flew down, and the turkeys followed, and the master drove the gander and his family back to the yard. "You will get your wings clipped tomorrow," he said. And then, from under his arm, he released a big yellow and black rooster, which flew to the ground, looked about, spread his wings, and crowed in a way that plainly said, "I am cock of this walk and king of this yard. Let none dispute my rights." The drake collected his family and started for the pond, and the gander and geese followed along behind. The turkey spread his wings and held his head high as he strutted away with his family. But he did not impress the new rooster. He was ruler, and he knew it. "Now the sun will know when to rise," said one hen, "and we shall know when to awake." "Yes," said another, "and we have had a narrow escape. It looked for a while as if our family were to lose its social standing, but now that we have a new king, we can hold up our heads again and look down on the others, if we have to go to the top of the woodpile to do it." The dog laughed to himself as he walked away. "I knew all the time," he said, "that the new rooster was coming, but I thought it would do them good to know they were only fitted to care for their own flock." Rest well and wake up refreshed for a brand new day. Good night.